Good morning. We'll call the council workshop to order and ask Ms. Wirt if she'll call the roll.
Mayor Joe McComb.
Here.
Council members Rudy Garza.
Here.
Paulette Guajardo.
Present.
Michael Hunter. Debbie Lindsay Opal. Ben Molina.
Present.
Everett Roy.
Present.
Lucy Rubio is absent. Greg Smith.
Here.
Interim City Manager Keith Selman.
Here.
City Attorney Miles Risley.
Here.
Mayor and Council, a quorum of the council and the required charter officers are present to conduct the meeting.
All right. Well, we'll get into it. We're going to try to do this between now and noon, if not sooner. And Mr. Selman, you're on.
Mayor, the first thing we'd like to do, we're looking to break this workshop into 3 parts. 1, to talk about the streets. 2, to talk about parks, and both related to the bond. And then 3rd, an additional amount of revenue that we anticipate to come in based on valuations. And with that, I'd ask Val to kick us off into the transportation.
Good morning. Valerie Gray, Executive Director of Public Works. Let's start off the first slide. First up is the street improvement plan, and as we gave you before, I'll review once again with a couple of my slides. This is the slide I put up that shows the street condition. The existing street system network is approximately 1,200 miles, with approximately 159 miles of arterials, 211 miles of collectors, and 835 miles of residential or local streets. The chart here in front of you shows the current total street network conditions separated by street classification side by side for easy comparison. Each of the sections separated by the black line represents 100% for each of the 3 classifications. As you can see, 50% of the arterials and the collectors are in what we call good condition, and approximately 50% of the residential or local streets in poor condition. And once again, I remind you that's based on the pavement condition index that we use, the inventory, and it represents PCI data.
Mayor, on this particular slide, there's the idea being to increase the green in all quadrants. You've got your local streets, your arterial streets, and your collector streets. You can see on the arterials and the collectors how that has expanded to beyond 50%, and that the local street is only 32% good. And what we're looking to do is to develop that reconstruction program in the residential street in order to increase the green space over on the local streets. The policy decision, though, will come much later. It won't be this year, but it will be in a future year. City councils will need to decide what is an acceptable percentage in the green. In other words, where do we want to be in the green? Right now we're playing catch up, and we know that. And 50% I don't think is where we want to be. We want to move that needle much higher. But at some point in time, the city councils will make a decision. We want to stay 80% green, or we're going to stay 75% green. And there will be a cost tied to that in future years. But that's a future council decision, but that's a policy decision that's coming down the road in terms of acceptable level in the good.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Although it may not always seem that way, significant progress improving our street system has been made, and we continue to focus on funding, and the needs continue to exceed the resources. But we've put together this street improvement plan, and you'll see it here. It has 4 quadrants. The chart highlights the funding associated with each of those focus areas. And some of the things we pointed out is, in 2013, one significant change was the creation of a special revenue fund, 1041. It is the street fund. It is where the funds go for street operations and everything associated with the fixing and maintaining of our streets. To ensure all funds are dedicated, that were dedicated for streets, were used for streets. What they did was move the funds at budget time from the general fund to this 1041, and we ensured that those funds were separated. And as mentioned before, in 2015, a residential reconstruction fund, 1042, was created to readily identify funds collected for use only on the reconstruction of residential streets. And it is shown here with the revenue projection chart of all the resources down on the left right-hand side corner. This was presented previously again by the city manager, and it shows all the revenues that come into that 1042. So you'll see the 4 quadrants representing each of the areas we were focusing on. And that was just an overview of the street improvement plan. And once again, I'll proceed with the proposed 2018 bond program overview. And first is a chart. This is the proposed 2018 program, which totals $96 million. It has 7 propositions, and Proposition A and B make up most of the program at $74 million. There are arterials and collector streets and other traffic-related improvements, and the remaining 5 propositions, C through G, make up the remaining $22 million. And is comprised of facility and operational improvements. Proposition A is highlighted in orange, and it represents the only proposition not requiring a tax increase. You will also see that we drew a line through Proposition E, because at the last workshop we talked about removing that proposition, but we haven't quite made the decisions yet if we take that funding and remove it totally or move it somewhere else. So you'll see that's what the line designates. Proposition A is made up of 25 improvement projects as shown here, and they total $52 million. Most of the projects are arterial and collector street improvements, and the representative segments are from all 5 council districts. The last 5 projects you'll see at the bottom are for other traffic-related improvement projects that are citywide throughout the city. But once again, this is Proposition A and doesn't require a tax increase.
And just for clarification, these Proposition A are all collector and arterials?
Yes, sir, collector and arterials. Proposition A, as I said before, requires no property tax increase, but the budgets do not include utility costs, which, as mentioned before, it does not include utility costs which are required for the associated utility improvements by these street projects. If approved by the voters, the residential customers will see an approximate $2 per month increase on their utility bill associated just with Proposition A. Okay? This is Proposition B. It is also mayor, collectors, and arterials. It's made up of 14 improvement projects, which total approximately $22 million. These projects, again, being arterials and collectors, and are also representative segments from all 5 council districts. And you see them here. Proposition B, totaling at $22 million, requires a property tax increase of 1 cent. And it also does not include the utility costs required for the associated utility improvements. If Proposition B is approved by the voters, residential customers will see an approximate 82 cents per month increase on their utility bills. This is Proposition B, both being streets. This chart is a chart that staff put together to try to easily summarize some of the options that was given at the last workshop. And I'll just explain that if you take a look at the extreme left-hand column, you'll see all the different funding sources. And if you take a look, the first recommendation is that one that lined up with the original recommendation given to you by the city manager. The number 2 is what we had summarized that the mayor had mentioned. Number 3 is Mr. Smith's, and number 4, Miss Lindsay Opal. And the 5th one was another one that was the city manager will tell you about. But these options down kind of summarize in each of those areas what would happen. If you take a look at the extreme bottom, we attempted to try to summarize what the recommendation was doing as far as that goes. So I think at this time we'll I don't know if you want to go in more detail or read them through or what.
Mayor, this is about where we left off at our last workshop. And if you double check the ones that is mentioned, might have your name above it. Double check it, make sure we got that right. I think we did. But Val's team watched the video a couple of 3 times to try to get that right.
We hope we got it right.
So
It's okay.
give that a look. Staff's recommendation is still remains to move the INS over to M&O.
Okay. Ms. Opal?
So when we look at, I'm trying to translate, and sometimes it doesn't, so feel free to tell me. But when you're talking about $2 on a utility bill, so if I were, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question. So what would it take in an increase in taxes per se to get a $2 increase? Is that a de minimis amount? Is it a lot of amount? I mean, so for example, if we were going to increase our tax rate and the citizen would see $2 or $2.82 or whatever the total was on that, in terms of equating the amount of utility cost increases that they would see under this proposition, or these propositions, what would that look like? Does that make sense? You see what I'm asking?
Yes, we provided a slide on that at the last meeting. Don't know if we have that slide.
Because I know like a penny generates X million dollars, but taking it back the other way, so X million dollars in utility costs generate I guess you could get to it that way.
Well, if you're saying Proposition 2 would take a 2-cent increase and the utility cost is a 1-to-1 match, and you'd need another 2 cents to cover that. So it'd be a 4-cent tax increase, right?
If it is 1-to-1, as you said.
It's 1-to-1, and we often say 1-to-1, but as we had mentioned to Mrs. Smith before, we always try to minimize the amount of utility work that we have to do. But in the case of this, the feasibility reports we did, it kind of looked at where the utilities needed to be done, but it more looked at pinning down the amount of street work that would needed to be done.
Okay, so basically.
So it's basically an estimate.
By 2021, on a property's valuation of, I think we used 180,000. Property tax plus utilities in the year 2021 would be an extra 230 a year.
Okay, so I guess if I were trying to get this down to the simple, I think, Mayor, that really helped to go and say it's kind of 1-to-1. So although Prop A, as it's presented, would not require a tax increase per se, it would get an equivalent of a 2 cent on just in the big number, because I know, again, it's pockets, and our voters can't tell the difference often of whether it's a utility cost or whether it's a property tax cost or a fee. So in the grand scheme of things, it would be sort of like that. So that's just what I needed to get in my mind. All right, thanks.
Mr. Smith?
Thanks, and I'd like to expand on that a little bit. We're talking these numbers, $2.80 a month, both 1 and 2. That's about $33 a year we're going to add to the bills. And we know how our billing system is. It's really loaded in on the high users. So as we're traveling down this path where the average bill will go up about $33, I think some of our high users are going to see a lot more than that with it, since we have so much minimum use. So again, we've talked about it before, that it really has a serious impact. And the fact we have the second highest sewer rates in the state, we have $220 million in sewer debt, with 5 plants that need serious work on there. I think is accumulation of this. So thank you. I think we do need to be cognizant of these impacts to it, not only what it does to our rate and overall debt loads. So that's why I keep beating this horse. Thanks.
Okay. Good.
Okay. If we move to the next slide. Oh. That's it, right?
No, Mayor, what we would want to do is to work through this discussion and get some direction on this. We are coming up against some timelines.
All right, well, did you want to go over
on the street portions? Yes.
Did you want to discuss that number 5 that I think is a new one that Or do you want to?
Well, it's a very similar proposal. It's taking your type B and paying for the engineering over the years, and then putting in the equivalent of that in potential.
All right. Well, let me ask this question. And I'm just trying to think how you slice this pie. Your type B is for arterial and collectors, correct?
Correct.
And there's I'm trying to figure out a way without committing the type B money for the next 20 years. And everything I come up with is to get where I'm trying to go to, you got to commit it for 20 years to pay the bonds.
Well, even if you go with a spend as you go on it, you're still committing it. Going to be committed to arterials and collectors.
Well, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, the flexibility of what you use and what you don't, which streets and this sort of thing. I guess my first general question is, it's anticipated that over each year, the type B, assuming all things equal, would generate about $3 million for arterial and collectors.
Correct. That should escalate over time.
And this year, we're collecting it, but we really haven't made any commitments. So by the time we get any of these projects, let's just say we start planning to spend some of that type B money, and you may have some in the pipeline, arterial and collectors, that are already ready to go. You're just needing the funding for them. But if it takes another year to kind of get them up and ready, the design, engineering, bidding, and awarding, that's a year. So that would get us another $3 million. So you got $6 million.
This year plus next year would get you about 4.2. We didn't get a full year this year.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just, because $3 million, I think we asked the question early in the discussion 2 or 3 workshops ago, $3 million would sustain $20 million worth of bonds on the payments? Or what did we come up with on that?
I think
To service, how much debt can $3 million service?
Mayor, I believe Noe testified that would be roughly the Prop A, about 52 to 55 million, something like that. I think that's what Noe testified to a couple of workshops back.
All right, so if we go with Prop A, which is based ad valorem.
Correct.
But if we want to maximize and still maintain some flexibility with some funds in the type B, if you did just, well, your proposition B is, it's 20-something million, isn't it?
22. Yes, sir.
So if 3 million will support 50-something million, then $1.5 million would support 20 million. No, somebody shaking their head yes or no, it is, it will or won't.
It's
What I'm trying to think is, for this council or for future councils, I mean, I always like to have a little flexibility because there may be some street that pops up for whatever reason, a sinkhole or something that, or there's a new proposal in town, they need a major road to get to some new entity that's coming to town that's going to generate a lot of.
that can come out of the ED side in the B.
The ED side.
The other 50%.
Right.
Oh, okay. I'm just, if you took half of your type B and committed to covering Proposition B, that'd be $1.5 million. I'd still leave you $1.5 million that's uncommitted on an annual basis, just so you'd have it to do something else. And you may be able to, can you, I'm assuming you can unless the lawyer tells me different. It's residential and, I mean, if it's arterial and collector, part of those arterial and collectors is the utilities under those streets. That's all part of the package, right?
Correct. Well, that's not part of the bond package.
It's not part of the bond package. It's part of what the people are going to get hit with their utilities.
That's correct.
So could you use the other part of that type B to pay for the utility portion so that the ratepayer wouldn't be hit with that on their utility bill? It's all part of streets. The attorney's looking kind of with a raised eyebrow.
Read that language.
Then I will let him answer that question.
Good dodge.
Is your question, can you use type B to do utility projects? Yeah, you can use your type B to do that are associated with the reconstruction. But you're talking about on their own? No. But
No.
You're saying, can they expand that street to include?
I'm not talking about just going out and starting doing utility work. I'm talking about the utility work associated with streets. You're going out here to put in a new collector on arterial, and you're going to tear it up, make everybody happy, because we're putting in new utilities as opposed to just doing a top coat or whatever you call it, seal coat or whatever. Then that's part of that street construction, which, in my opinion, would be part of the street cost, which is covered under type B.
And your question, and the question is, can you just expand the type B coverage to include the entirety of the street all the way down?
Yeah. I mean, when you get an apple pie, you get the crust, you get the apples, you get the syrup, you get the sugar, you get everything else. It's an arterial or collector, in my opinion, is the whole enchilada, unless you're just repairing or doing something else.
I think that you probably can. You're essentially deleveraging. You know, we have leveraged the streets to include with the utility funding, but you're suggesting deleveraging that. I think you probably can, but let me put a caveat on that. There's some special type B language I need to make sure of. So,
And Mayor, if you remember, if you do that, then you're going to reduce the number of streets you'll do. Your lane miles is going to go down.
large degree you can, partly because you some of that you
Well, I'm just trying to look at all options.
Yes, sir.
It's taking way too long, but the clock's ticking, so we got to come up with something. But
Past councils have considered doing the entire project. But yes, since it's a one-to-one, you minimize the amount of streets that you can do to try to maximize the funding to take care of the streets. That's why I think traditionally it's been separated where the utilities paid for any utility improvements.
all right, now, and just so I'm clear in my mind, the existing utility charge, the street charge on the utility bill is for collector and arterial only? Or is there some residential?
It's to take care of the bond programs, and yes, those are collector and arterial projects.
No, slide back to the other slide.
Oh, what?
Go back a few slides.
Okay. All the way to the beginning?
All the way to
Okay.
the quad pie chart. That one.
Okay, so I'm sorry, what's the question?
Your 1041 fund.
Yes, the street maintenance fee. You're talking
that's the street maintenance fee.
Street preventative maintenance program. The street preventative maintenance program, it takes care of the overlays and the seal treatments. And in most cases, it is minimal utility work that's done, and that utility work is done by the utilities in advance of that street work.
All right. But the line item on the utility bill, street fee.
Yes, it's strictly to support taking care of the pavement section.
But that's in 1041.
Yes, and that's for all street reclassifications, arterials, collectors, and residential. But that line item you see, it takes care of that program, and it takes care of all 3 classifications, but those are streets in good condition to keep them in good.
Okay, but that 1041 can be used for some residential.
It is being used for residential good streets to keep them good. Yes,
And
yes,
the
sir.
funding in the 1042 is just simply for residential.
Is simply for residential, and it's reconstruction of the streets that's in poor condition.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right, keep going, or Ms. Opal.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, you can go back to that slide you were on, because basically 90% of what you just said is what's covered in my proposal. I think the first thing we need to do, though, is have this philosophical discussion about utilization of the allocated portion of the Type B funds for arterials and collector streets, because that's, I may have mentioned, I had someone say, well, if the council takes action now, they'll lock that up for the next 20 years. And I'm kind of struggling with this question personally of, so what if we do? I mean, right. So what if we, under my plan, I'm looking at doing some of what you're doing, maybe moving it in a little different way, but then leaving about half of that fund, maybe a little less, to accumulate. So in the 6 years that the previous council said we'll do something about residential streets in 6 years, we'd have another $10 million in that fund to be able to look at doing some of the things you're talking about, Mayor, in terms of design or whatever. But it would put $20 million on the ground in the next 24 months probably, because it would probably take that timeline to get some of this going, but it would create this street funding program for residential streets that would accelerate and kickstart that program. What it does, and I'm curious to know, when you guys are looking at trends, Ms. Gray, over time on these projects, every year, how much does it increase to go do a project? Do you kind of get a trend line on cost of asphalt, cost of resources? I mean, every year we're not doing something, those prices go up. We have not seen that come down, maybe a little with oil, but does that come down or does it go up?
It varies. It's hard to say what it does. Price of everything is going up, but some come down. I mean, it's the same way we did some concrete streets, because the price of concrete was
correct,
matching asphalt. So it's hard to say. But overall, we say it's better to fix a street now than to reconstruct it later. And so usually we say to maintain it and keep it from being reconstructed is the best thing in the world. Because once you get to reconstruction, no matter what, it's residential or arterial, it's going to be high.
Well, and I've talked to some other cities and asked them about what they're looking at, and they say it's probably a good rule of thumb is about 2%. So every year you wait, those costs are likely to go up somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5% to 2%. And we know that the cost of oil is down. Oil is a big input to asphalt. Is going to go back up. Asphalt's going to go back up. Residential streets right now are pretty much, you got it, asphalt. So I just come back to, I understand what you're saying, Mayor, but if we commit 100% of the Type B funds on something right now, it limits that flexibility. I think what the city manager is saying is also that down the road, if we have a project-specific infrastructure needs, such as streets, that can come off of the economic development side of the funding for project-specific kinds of infrastructure that you were talking about. So, and the other piece of that, my recommendation is that one of two things can happen. I don't understand the finances, so I always smile and give you that caveat. But rather than selling $52 million in bonds, looking at it this way, we would only be selling $42 million, and that might reduce our debt amount. Would that reduce, like, between the 51 to 42, or 52 to 42, that's 10 million. That would be not only a tax, we holding the taxes level, it would actually decrease the tax rate. Is that right? I can't see. I usually look for Constance. She's sitting behind Ms. Gray, but I see Ms. Carrillo nodding. So, I always put a question mark at the end. So actually under...
If you reduce the debt, you'll reduce the payment amount.
And then if we bring in Proposition B, which would technically, quote, increase, you could actually almost get A and B with no tax increase and get $20 million for residential streets.
Where are you getting the other $20 million? Oh, I see what you're doing. Just dropping the total to project listing.
Yeah, what I'm saying is if, when you look at Prop B, you could get half of Prop B.
10 million's worth of project out of A.
Yeah, so you could get, all of what we're saying is type, let me say it another way.
Dropping 30 million worth of projects out of A.
Right.
Putting
Bringing
in 20 million in residential.
And then you could pick up another 10 that's now in Prop B and hold it steady.
Correct.
Okay. I think
You
that's a
could do
good deal
that.
for the citizens. And you leave money in Type B in the street program in Type B that over time, 2 or 3 or 4 years, accumulates to allow you to do some of the things you want to do, which is to do some design work ahead of bond sales.
So you're talking about doing away with Prop B altogether and
Maybe not.
bringing in, just bringing in whatever projects backfill that extra 10 mil.
We could or we could not. I mean, we could reduce the amount, or we could leave the whole Prop B total, and then, you know, it would mitigate the amount of tax increase should the voters choose to have Prop B. Or we could just not give them that choice and say we're going to take half of that, roll it into Prop A, and leave the other 10 million in Prop B. I don't know. I just think there's a way to do this.
And what that does is that creates a residential project.
Program.
No, it doesn't. It
Kickstarts the program. What it does, it's a one-time expense, and I know why we're a little bit at odds over this, because it's a one-time expense. But to collect $20 million under the program you've recommended would take how many years?
From the displacement?
From like, if the voters said yes in November.
Less than 7 years.
So rather
6
than
to
waiting
7.
7 years for $20 million to throw at residential streets, which over that time is going to reduce the amount that you can do 1.5% to 2% a year. Yep. I'm suggesting that we kickstart this residential street. We leverage what the voters said, which is let's use Type B money to do some arterials and collectors.
Okay.
So we're going to get those done.
Okay.
We're going to kickstart the program. We're not going to wait 7 years. And by the time 7 years rolls around,
right,
then hopefully we'll have some additional resources to be able to support the program that you've recommended.
Okay, which projects do you want to take out of the Prop A? You got 30 million to subtract out of there.
Well, I thought you were going to help me with that, because that's the, you know, at that point that would become the negotiation. I don't know these projects intimately like staff does, and it would be, I mean, I could pull them out, I can do math, but I'm not sure what it means. So the Prop A, the mayor suggested that, I can never say the name of that street, the one out off Rodfield, that's 100% done. So you take the ones that are more complete and, you know,
there will be 3 that will be 100% designed, but it won't be till the end of the year. Only 3 that will be.
Well, we're not going to have the money
designed.
anyway.
We don't have any others that's completely designed, waiting to go. We're in the process of design.
We would bring that to you at the direction of council.
So that would be my.
If the council directs us to come back.
There you go.
And now we're going into timing of meetings to set the ballot. Special meeting, I would recommend a special meeting at that point. Sure. Because of some window crunches that a pretty tight window on the on setting the election.
Well, my favorite minute's the last minute, so we're good.
Yeah, but we would only go in and whittle that list down at the direction of council.
Okay, so, but that's what I wanted to clarify, is I think that the mayor and I may be talking sort of on the same path, and unless I'm understanding it differently, being able to put $20 million into a kickstart program for residential streets at no tax increase to the voters, and then be able to retain some of that Type B money for collector and arterial streets to allow it to get to a substantial amount, or wherever that need might be. As Ms. Gray pointed out, perhaps it's to pre-design some bond projects in the future for arterial and collector streets. And then we might be able to reduce the tax burden and then just leave B where it is. I mean, that would be, to me, I think it fulfills our commitment to the voters. We do what they ask us to do in arterials and collectors. We do what they've been asking, which is let's get some momentum for residential streets, and we don't tie down the hands of staff completely, and we get there sooner than 7 years.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Well, I fully support doing something on residential streets, so option 3, 4, 5. I'm in favor of one of those because they all address residential streets. I think as we're looking at this, though, we need to remember debt is debt. Whether it's a certificate of obligation or a bond, it's still debt that this city's going to have to pay for with it. And if we look at our past history, we've been loading up debt. So A lot of the issues we have today is because we do have a lot of debt. And like I said earlier, we have the second highest per capita debt in the state of major cities on there. So I don't want to personally be putting a lot of debt out there. I think we've got a good residential plan there putting together. If we go with the 222, it's going to be bringing some funding streams on relatively quickly with it. So $3.4 million first year, and the second year will be 6.8. We'll be over $10 million with it. I think we do need some kick starting though. That we need an ongoing residential plan, which we've done. We did that with the 2016 bond election. But like I say, option 3 is kind of in the middle. That's $10 million for residential streets. We have option 5 at $5 million, and we have option 4 at $20 million. So, I want to do something on residential streets, and if we're in agreement, it's just kind of what do we want to do? Let's decide how quick do we want to start it, how much debt do we want to incur to do it on there. So, thanks.
Mr. Garza?
I think that, again, all the options are good. I just caution the council when we go to the voters, and the more we complicate it, the less likely they are to support a bond program. Right now I'm kind of leaning toward option 5 related to funding the design. One of the complaints that I've heard about some of the programs we have related to improving our streets is how long it takes to get the programs going. And I know that pre-design helps us get there sooner rather than later. The question that I have, though, is rather than we talk about fund design, just define, just so we know, Proposition A, and then we've got A and C. What is A and C referring to? Because if you look at the propositions.
Arterials and collectors.
Okay. Arterials and collectors. I just want to make sure when I'm talking about Proposition A and Proposition C, which is something that the public may have an issue with us using Type A to fund some of the projects in Proposition C. The reason that I see the benefit in jump starting and throwing $20 million at the residential street program. I really don't think, at the end of the day, whether it's through an EDC tax or whether it's through utility bills or whether it's through ad valorem tax increases, I mean, the public's going to pay, and they're going to pay somewhere. It's going to come out of either one pocket or another, but we still pay. It's just a matter that they've already approved the EDC tax, so the monies that are there through the Type B is stuff that they've already given us approval for. What we're trying to do, and one of the reasons why, at one time I thought that cost of a street includes all the utility replacement underneath, so why are we talking about? Because we're going to continue to add pressure, but when you're trying to actually get a program going and trying to get there as quickly as possible, you come to the realization that our capacity under our ad valorem taxes, or what we've got in terms of, I'm going to say our overall debt, and then the debt that we incur related to utility replacement comes out of revenue bonds, two different type. And debt is debt. I agree with you, debt is debt. But it's allowed us to at least get to the program where you see the pie and you're seeing what we have. Better than 50% of collectors and arterials are good streets. And so I've seen some progress. And again, I think that they're trying to use that money in terms of doing design for propositions A or possibly A and B. I think A is probably the safest bet from the type B funds. For me, makes kind of the most sense, because if you take and put specific streets in the bond language, then you're less likely to get it to pass if you're trying to do that. So I don't know the mechanics. If the voters approve Proposition A, and then we take in some of the design costs we're paying with Type B funds, we still have to put in there some language that says we're going to do some residential street reconstruction work in there.
We would
how general can we get?
Well, it would be a general residential street. We wouldn't define the residential streets, if that's your question.
Yeah, that's the concern that I have, is it's likely not to pass if some majority of people say, well, that doesn't include my street, so I'm not voting for it. And so that's always the concern. We've been able to do the collectors, everybody uses the collectors and arterials. We've been able to get the work, yeah, and everybody uses them.
Right.
But the residential streets is totally different. Right. I guess animal, that's why it's taking so long to crack.
With the street improvement plan, that was one of the reasons why they wanted to increase it from 4-year cycle to 2-year cycle, was to even improve more arterials and collectors at a faster pace, because we had so many. But, you know, that's what people see today. They're seeing that. That's the streets they're traveling on.
That's the other thing, too, is that, I mean, if you look at the 2+2+2, it's a 6-year program. We still have to get started, right? So we're probably talking about, before we're complete with a lot of those, probably 8 to 10 years.
Some of the start is what we've done and what we're going to do with the 3.5 and what we're going to bring you back tomorrow on the 2016. That's some of the residential streets that we've been trying to at least try to tell the public, look, we are making steps towards that, and that we're still struggling to develop a program that'll be sustainable and we can keep going to do it, because we got to make a big impact, as he said, to move it to green in the residential quadrant.
Yeah. Like I said, again, once you define the A and C part, I'm kind of leaning toward supporting the 5 portion. That's just my own opinion, just because I think it's a little bit more simple. And the selling point is that if we go forward with fund design, you're going to get your streets, you know, that you approve in A sooner, because we can go right to construction on them going forward. Thank you.
Ms. Opal.
I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One is I talked to both Dr. Ferguson, who chaired the First Street Committee, and with Alan Wilson, who chaired the Second Street Committee, before I brought this forward. And both of them agreed that when it comes to residential streets, we need to take action sooner rather than later. So Dr. Ferguson and his committee was probably 4 years ago when they did that? It was a while ago. And, you know, still the momentum that they felt was needed, some things have happened, but the momentum really hasn't taken off, and we're not seeing that kind of activity. The second thing I would note, that in the recommendation as it's presented, it actually decreases taxes. And I don't think any of the others can say that. And the third piece that I would point out is that the funds that I'm suggesting be used to pay for that portion of arterial and collector streets is not being paid for on the backs of simply the property owners in Corpus Christi. The funding that comes from the Type B funds is paid for by anyone who pays sales taxes in the city of Corpus Christi. In the past year, the folks who've been paying sales taxes in the city of Corpus Christi have been buying a lot of lumber, construction equipment, eating in a lot of restaurants. They haven't been going to a lot of attractions, but they've been here because of some other reasons. And so they've been driving those big trucks over our arterial and collector streets. And absent using these funds for construction costs, there is no reason, no way that they actually pay for them directly. And so when I thought of how we can do this, and the fourth piece of that is that I am not recommending that we use 100% of the Type B funds to pay for all of this bonding at this point in time, so that I know that Mr. Smith has asked about the term pay-as-you-go comes along, and pay-as-you-go comes at a price. Pay-as-you-go means you got to wait until you got it and then you spend it. So I understand that there are many ways to get to where we're going, and I think we're all going to the same place, as Mr. Garza pointed out, that we're looking for ways to enhance our residential streets over time, and I think we're getting there. I think there are plans and programs and opportunities to do that. My thought is to look at it in the sense of jump-starting it, giving our citizens the opportunity to vote if they choose to increase the taxes on themselves, but by reducing the tax burden, it gives them a little more flexibility and offers opportunity as we grow. Thank you.
Mr. Garza.
As I recall, there was an additional street committee that we appointed, which Andy Topman chaired, and so again, you know,
That's the last one.
but and again, you know, we've done a lot of work trying to get to where we are today, and trying to get to where we're hoping to get in the future. I don't. At the end of the day, when you look at the whole thing, and if you're looking at saying that you're providing a tax reduction. I don't think that there's truly going to be a tax reduction when you're looking at saying we're still going to go to 2 + 2 + 2 at some point in order to get a viable street reconstruction program going. The last time we went from 55 million to 110 million in 2012 or 2014, I just remember the issues that we had trying to step up a program faster than we thought we had the administrative capacity to do. And we stumbled over ourselves, and I think we had some things that did not go as smooth as we would have liked. So it's taken us a while to get past a point of getting over, trying to run faster than we can possibly run. And that's part of what I'm drawn at. And the biggest thing in terms of just the political side of it is that, yeah, you know, we can stand up here, we can talk about all the things that we've done. We can talk about even if we put another $20 or $30 million forward, but I think that there was a lot of work done before I came on the council. There was some done certainly before my colleagues came on the council. And I think that you got to leave a little bit there for, not that I wouldn't love to get it off if I could just snap my fingers and get it all fixed, but if we use up all the funds today and we say we did this, you leave very little for, even though everybody paid for it, you leave very little for future councils. And I may not be on this council, you know, in 6 months from now, and certainly after 2 years from now, I won't be. But I'd like for there to be something that the you know, coming councils can take credit for. And so that's just my own opinion, my own personal position. And yeah, we can spend all the money and get it all done now. Or not, we can't get it all done now. We'll be doing instead of doing 5 or 6 miles of residential street reconstruction, we'll be doing 20. You know, so it's a small number. When 20 is a small number compared to the whole $800 million, you know, 800 miles of residential streets that we have to do. So that's just my position. That's why I'm going to support item 5. Thank you.
Mr. Roy?
So I just want to make sure I understand on Proposition 4. At the end of the day, we're saying that under Prop A, it would be 22 million. Prop B would be at 22 million. And then residential, or the bond, Prop A residential streets would be at 20. I'm thinking about, in just terms of the voter looking at this plan in terms of the ease of it. You know, I know 5 is pretty easy to comprehend, but I think 4 is probably just as easy to probably comprehend if they look at that at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, they know that, okay, if we vote for this, we should have 20 million in residential streets, which I think is going to be a big plus. Am I looking at that correctly?
I don't, not quite.
No?
What the proposal is to go in and look at the Prop A, take out 30 million in arterials and collectors.
Right, and if you do that, what does that give you?
22.
That's right.
But bringing back in 20 for residential streets. So
right.
It doesn't drop it to 22, it puts it to 42.
Okay, that's the part I was missing.
That would make it about half and half, right? Half residential, half arterial and collector?
Right about.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Risley?
You asked a question, Mayor, and I want to be sure I clarify my answer. You had suggested the possibility of essentially expanding the inclusion of the Type B to cover the utilities underneath the street. And there's 2 sets of utilities, well, 3 sets. There's sewer, water, and there's the drainage portion of that set of utilities. The drainage, it's no problem. Many times drainage is normally included within a street. That's so let me remind the council, not only are they needing to comply with the Type B guidelines that are in the state law, they also need to comply with the proposition language that divides up the Type B to 50% for economic development, up to $500,000 annually on affordable housing, and the balance of the proceeds for construction, maintenance, and repair of arterial and collector streets and roads. So the ability to expand that to portions of the utilities depends on your ability to include those utilities and in the definition of arterial and collector streets and roads. So it's easy to do with drainage. It's a little more difficult when you get down to the sewers and the water that are underneath the street.
Well, I won't argue semantics, but I've got just one other thing just to throw out. Since we're here talking, we're not making any decisions today other than just maybe some direction.
Well, we would like some decisions,
All right.
Mayor. It's getting time to stop cutting bait on this.
All right. We mentioned the type B, and we mentioned the utility fees, and then all of a sudden, well, no, you could move those over to the economic development, wherever that is. If that's not type B, then there's another economic development fund, right?
Well, 50% of the type B is economic
But
development.
we keep, and I heard somebody say then you could move some others over to economic development. So there's
that was that discussion of the other 50% of the B. That's
okay,
what we
so
were
there's
talking
not
about.
some other economic development fund out there that I wasn't aware of that just appeared today.
Correct.
All right, because I was going to say, well, we need to be looking at all the potential pots of money before we make a decision, and if there's another pot out there that I wasn't aware of, then that's what I wanted. Okay, now here's just one for the, and Ms. Sanchez don't have a heart attack. What if you just funded this with COs and you didn't have to have an election?
All of Prop A?
The whole, well, I'm looking, I guess part of my county experience is that they just funded some things with COs and moved forward and got it done.
Right. You could definitely do that. You could take,
And that would give you a
take
chance.
Prop A off, not even Type B becomes Prop A, Prop B becomes Prop A, and so on and so forth. I see what you're saying. Just go forward with it.
But getting back to Mr.
CO.
Smith's concern, which is mine, is that however you slice it, your debt's debt. I don't care whether it's coming out of your watch pocket or your hip pocket or her pocket. It's all coming out of our pockets. So however you load the mule up on the stuff on the wagon, the poor old mule's got to pull it. So I think we need to keep, and historically, I think the city, for these kind of things, has always gone with general obligation. But I mean, we've done it with, COs are available to us.
Correct.
But I think we need to try to keep it as simple as possible. And the residential, there's no question people are interested in residential. Now, Rudy made a comment, and I think that, and I don't want any confusion. The 2+2+2 is a 3-year program. It's not a 6-year program. It can be a 6-year program, but it's conceivable that this council sitting here today could implement the full 2+2+2 before, well, no. This council and the next council could implement the 2+2+2 within the 3 years.
Correct. And within a 24-month period, you will
Right.
have moved the needle on the tax rate 6 cents.
That's right. You could stretch it out to a penny a year, but technically, under the approval of the voters, it could be not to exceed 2 cents per year. So this budget cycle is 2, next budget cycle is 2, which would be in 19. And the next budget cycle in 20 would be the third 2.
And that's anticipated to be an indefinite program, a program that we would use for.
All right, we've heard Ms.
residential street
Opal's
reconstruction.
explanation of her proposal, and to go back over what you're saying, the difference between a program and a project, so that everybody kind of understands what your proposal is that sets us up on a long-term deal. I think we're all wanting, the good part about this discussion is that there has not been this much attention paid to improving our residential streets for 40 years. So we're making a tremendous amount of progress. It's just a matter of how much, how quick. So I think we're making great progress, but I think we want to do it right and place as little burden. I mean, people are willing to bite the bullet if they feel like it's going to move it forward, but you can't overload them. And so go over your program versus projects.
The program would be to move your INS tax rate over to your M&O and support the indebtedness on your arterials and collectors with your Type B. That allows you the flexibility to move that tax rate amount.
So you'd be committing, you'd move over the 1.5 or 1.6 or whatever it is.
Correct.
Over to the M&O.
Correct.
And then your Type B then would be paying the Prop A projects.
Correct.
And that 1.5 would put $3 million in the general fund.
For street reconstruction a year.
For residential or just street construction?
Street reconstruction. Residential street reconstruction, yes. We'd put it into the 42.
All right. And of course, anything is subject to council decisions. Each council would have that decision to make. But I mean, that would, and if you do, if you move that over, that $3 million that you're talking about, and then your 2 + 2 + 2 gets us about, that'd get us, once you get it all implemented, that's $10 million a year, right?
It gets close to that, yes sir, it does. And by 2020, you'd be right at $10 million a year from those two movements.
All right, now, and then I think Ms. Opel hit on a comment that I think I'd heard, or maybe Rudy had made a comment, I can't remember which one. At some point, and maybe Mark or Engineering Valerie, and it may come as a shock to you, but we get talked to by a lot of people out in the community.
What?
You know, this is not an employment program for anybody. This is how we address residential street, trying to solve a residential street problem. Realistically, what is the capacity of the community to handle projects? I mean, somebody says, oh, we need $100 million. Well, they come out and say, well, you don't have enough contractors to do $100 million. Well, they do $20 million. Well, they can do a whole lot more than that. Well, I mean, realistically, and I think this is a good question. I mean, depending on who you talk to, what's the real capacity to do on an annual basis between your staff and the construction firms that do these sorts of projects?
I knew you would ask me.
Big and small.
You would ask me a tough question, Mayor. I'd first like to say fixing streets, especially streets, is a nationwide problem, and you're absolutely right. Working towards that, we've been working really hard. I don't know what that number is. I know Jeff's been up here and he's talked about it quite often. I could tell you that the project we're bringing you tomorrow, which is the 2016, we had 6 bidders. I'm not quite sure what that number is. I think the interest is still there. You had 6 bidders, and the one that got it, they have not done residential or street construction. They've done more smaller projects, and so there's more interest in getting in there. I know we talked a lot about with the Harbor Bridge project and some of the work that's going to take place. You're going to have more construction companies coming in doing more work, but to absolutely give you a value on what that is, I'm not quite sure. Some of the things that have helped us in-house is the one you're going to see tomorrow is an IDIQ. If you actually get into the worst first, like we've done before, you're going to have to do more design, and they'll be more like construction projects, so they'll go a little bit slower. The IDIQ way of procurement is really easy because you can get out there and do the delivery orders. But you do still have interest. I don't know what that number is. We can attempt to come up with a number.
Mayor, I could say, I think to the credit of Val and Jeff and the rest of the team over there, that they have moved the needle on how quickly projects are getting out the door. And that is definitely happening. The other side of that coin, and it's the same coin, is tolerance. What is the tolerance of the community if you were to start investing and doing reconstruction simultaneously on $100 million or $200 million worth of streets, and all of a sudden every street in town is getting blown up, and every time somebody gets in their car, they have an extended length of time that they're having to drive in through construction zones. Those are other things that come up.
But all I can do is judge exactly what he's saying and based on the bids. I think when you see them not bid on it anymore, then you're going to see that they're not interested. If they're not bidding, they're loaded, they've got jobs elsewhere, they're not interested. Or if they bid them where they're not even comparable to the cost of what the estimates are. But we got 6 bidders, and we're going and blowing. We're not holding back.
Okay, and that's good. But you made a comment that was, maybe I didn't quite understand, and you said the low bidder that we're fixing to go with doesn't have experience in residential?
They have street experience, but they've not done, say, an arterial project. Several of those street committees, you've had 4 of them now. I just want you to know since I've been here. Several of those street committees, one of the ways they thought is we need to bring in new contractors, we need smaller contractors. So smaller contractors are good sometime if they have the experience to do that work. They're not the usual ones. One of them has done the minor pavement improvements contract. So they've done more, it's more spot work, small stretches. They know street work, but they haven't really had a full job. So that's pretty good. They have that experience. The other one is a contractor that has done more street work, I think, in other communities, but right now they're doing our seals. Locally, they're doing just the seals. Now you're going to see them get into tomorrow. Those are the 2 bidders. One is Weaver, I think, and one is Ortiz.
Ortiz, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So there are 2, and so we're pretty excited about that because we believe they both are very good companies and they'll do a good job. I'm praying they do a good job because the better they do, the more they can do, the more they can get into this role of doing more of the street work.
Okay.
Because a big part of the residential work, it goes slower only because I told you the stakeholders. These are residences, driveways, sidewalks. These are not businesses. You know, usually businesses, you put the blue signs up, you make sure they can get in and out of the driveway, and you do the work and get out. But in a residential neighborhood, a lot more with parking when you're doing the work, timing. There's a lot more going on. So we're really stepping into it slowly as far as trying to expand the program.
Well, I think that's smart. Ms. Opal.
So really quickly, I know the mayor's going to get frustrated with me here in a minute. On the communication side, if you were to staff, and I know this is always, communication gets a little iffy, but if you were to staff in your department the communications cadence for these residential street projects, or even the street projects, could you charge those back to the work done by the bond? So for example, what you just said is so true. When you're doing residential and you block a street and somebody they can't get in their driveway that night, that's a pretty big deal.
We have a PIO person that helps tremendously in Public Works. Additionally, we put public education and outreach as a part of what the contractor has to do.
I understand that, but our contractors don't have the same relationship as the city would have if we put a robust, it might only take one other additional person to be able to do that, but someone who's dedicated full time to being the outreaching. And I would just invite you to consider that, having seen some of the levels of energy that I only get a little window and you guys get the full. So just something to think about that.
We're getting off track a little bit.
Okay, so where I'm going to go back to is what the mayor just suggested. In successfully executing these projects for contractors, they have to have a pipeline. So if there's not a pipeline of projects, and what happens is when you do one-off projects, unless I'm mistaken, that contractor does one project, they mobilize, but if they don't have another one in their pipeline, they demobilize. So actually to look at efficiencies and lower costs long-term, where we have consistent levels of work, and we've heard that in the engineering community, it helps them to be able to staff and be successful in their businesses because they know that there's going to be work in that pipeline. So it actually kind of works the other way.
All right, well, I agree with that, but I think we're trying to decide what we want to do here. And Ms. Smith,
Oh, yeah, and I just want to follow up. So, Ms. Gray, I think a constant thread of the 4 committees was that consistent pipeline that, and it's really us as council to have the funding for that pipeline with it. And it ought to be a ramp-up pipeline on there, and then we reach that constant plateau and
That's correct.
on it, and that delivers the best value to our taxpayers, right?
Yes, sir.
So as we're looking at this, we need to develop long-term, consistent sources for our residential program, just like we've done on our.
You are absolutely right. That's why a program is good, because then the contractors can see that there will be continuation of a program. Same thing with our staffing. You're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And Mayor, that's as far as the program, that's right in line with creating the program. I think all the options on the table do at least 3 or 4 things. One, it's the expressed desire of the council to deal with residential streets, provides a twin approach, arterials and collectors through the bonding program, and then residential streets through a spend as you go, or some mechanism for residential streets. Staff's recommendation embellishes that street reconstruction program. The recommendation from council is to put more money in on the front end. And then the one thing that is not done with any of the other proposals is to guard against state legislative action in the future. If you move it to M&O now, you are putting yourself in a position where you're hedging against a potential legislative action to prohibit you from doing that in future years at the state level.
As an offshoot, I gave welcome to the Retailers Association yesterday, and they had a panel of legislators, and the first legislator in the panel indicated that the local communities have just gone nuts and that the legislature is here to save the local communities, and so there we bring you more stuff back this legislative session. And I asked him, I said, just because you're mad at Austin, don't penalize the rest of us. So we've got some work to do, and I think you're right on there. And if we better take opportunities while we got them. This is going to be a tough legislative session for cities if his attitude prevails. All right, so that's B is the program approach.
Yes, sir. Or the original recommendation.
I mean,
that's increasing.
5,
increasing,
not B, but 5. But that gets your residential.
Number 1 moves it to M&O, moves INS to M&O.
That's your program.
Increases the program. Correct.
All right. So this is the original is staff.
And 5 is an alternative that was proposed where you're using the B rather than infusing it to pay for debt. You would use the B to pay for engineering, and then you would leave your projects whole, and you would supplement that with whatever that engineering cost, and we're looking at 5.4. Then that becomes your residential project in Prop A. All the projects remain intact.
Okay. Anybody have any other discussion? Anybody want to make any more presentations? Chief, your police cars, they hit some potholes and they miss some, don't they?
You know, yeah. You know,
wise man, wise man.
Mayor, it is worth noting that as far as emergency services go and public safety go, the better the streets are, the quicker the response time. Those kind of issues are very real.
Well, they've set themselves a pretty good benchmark the other day with getting there in 9 seconds or whatever it was over there at that IBC bank. So if you beat that, man, okay. So what's the council's pleasure on this?
Mayor, we may have to do this like we do appointments and go up to Elmo, and I'm going to take this one, I'm going to take this one, and we go down and vote that way, and then we get down to our vote.
Well, so we got 5 nominees. Is that what we got? Or?
Yeah, let's go down. And
but the
Door number 1.
All right, so So really, the difference between 3, 4, and 5 are just the numbers, correct? Well, you got.
You mean in terms of the total amount going into residential? Yes. And one of them, 2 of them takes projects out of Prop A, 1 does not.
Well, I mean, I understand but the people that have been working on the Prop A numbers have been working at them a long time. And Ms. Opal asked a question, but she didn't get a good answer. Which one are we going to pull out? I'm not sure we want to get in that game at this point.
Well, those projects get funded. It's not that we're not saying those projects won't get funded. I understand that you have to balance them so that you're not adversely targeting a particular area of town, but those projects all are not. I think the question that they would get is whether or not there's a risk that they would not be funded, and that is not the case. There's no one on this council suggesting that any one of those propositions in Prop A would not be funded under any scenario, I believe.
Well, would you want to take those $30 million projects and put them in Prop B and increase Prop B to 52?
No, I would want to take them and pay for them out of.
Just take them out altogether.
See, pay with the caveat, with the direction to staff that they would be paid for under certificates of obligation, funded by half of the funding stream from the arterials and collectors Type B. That the projects under my recommendation, the projects that would come out of out of Prop A would be paid for by certificates of obligation issued with the full faith and backing of the sales tax collected under, half of the sales tax approximately, collected under Type B.
So the $30 million that you're pulling out, pay for it with COs.
Correct. What the mayor was saying, that we could sell COs for that. They would get built. There would be a virtually no hiccup in there whatsoever, that those would get constructed as well, using about half of the Type B money, leaving about half that money for future use, and then adding back in, not the full amount, but $20 million for residential street programming so that we could jumpstart the residential street program.
So you'd have 72 million Prop A plus CO combined.
Well, yeah, you're adding $20 million to the cost. Well, no, you're not adding 20 million.
You're adding 20 million to the debt, overall debt.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Because you're doing the CO.
Using the funding stream
CO
that's
for
paid
the 30.
for, using the $30 million that's paid for by everyone who's driving on those streets instead of
Right.
just the property owners, and thereby reducing the tax liability to the property owners in Corpus Christi, so that if they chose to take some of the additional propositions, they could add those in without a tax increase.
Yeah, 42 million supported by ad valorem, 30 million supported by Type B in a CO.
That's my recommendation.
Okay. I understand it completely now.
All right, but the bottom line is, your total debt would go up by $20 million, more than the bond proposal. Your bond proposal's what the total.
$2 million. I'm saying it's
No, the total bond proposal is.
Prop A is 52.
the total.
Total.
Total. What's your
It's,
total bonds?
96.
96, so it would go up $20 million if all of them passed.
Correct.
So that'd get us
Well,
90 and 96 and 20 is what?
that's 1.2.
100 and
110.
100 something.
16.
Yeah.
Less 1.2, right?
I'm like Greg, that. I don't know.
Well, Mayor, maybe the council could get quicker to a motion if you did follow the recommendation of the other council members, just go down which ones they favor at this point. That might narrow the scope a little bit.
All right, since, I mean, this is just kind of a, as they say, a sifting program.
Correct.
Who's going to keep score? All right.
Well, I'm definitely keeping score too. No, I'm not. I'm just kidding.
Okay, since Michael and Lucy aren't here, does that mean I get their votes too?
No, sir, it doesn't. I don't believe there's proxies in the workshops.
No proxies. You have to be present to vote, huh? Okay. Well, let's, all right, so why don't we out of the 5, do we want to rank them 5, or do we want to say, I mean, we just get 2 choices to kind of narrow it down to how do we want to do this? I want to try to be fair. Yeah. 3. All right, let's everybody put down their top 3.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
All right, so we got.
Start with Everett, he's new.
Yeah. Everett, you want Art, Everett?
So, and you want me to give them in the order?
No.
Not your favorite order, just pick 3, doesn't matter which order.
3, 5, 1.
I'll pick the same ones, 3, 5, 1.
Well, I'm going to go different, 1, 3, 5.
So am I, 1, 3, 5.
Well, I feel kind of bad nobody's voting for the mayor's number there. Hey, I'm, you know, my choices were 1, 3, and 5 too. Oh, wait a minute, no, 1, 5, and 3. We're going to go that way. The additional debt makes me nervous. I like it, but it makes me nervous. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm done. I just wanted to. Okay. That's not. I didn't record yours. 1 through 5. Oh, 1 through 5.
Well, since I swayed Mr. Smith to the dark side, I have to start with 4, but I'll go to 3 next, and then 5.
All great recommendations. Thank you all so much. I'm buying time here. I'm going to switch it up just a little bit. 5, 1, 3.
Okay.
Now we take a vote on 1, 3.
Now, if you've got 9 votes down there, you've got a problem.
Well, now I think, Mayor, it may be time for motions and action.
So we've narrowed it down to 1, 3, or 5. Is that what? I don't see the number.
1, 3, 5.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we got you got 7. Well, you really got. Well, what you got? You want if you want to go by the 2 top vote getters, or do you want to go with the top 3? Top 2 top.
Well.
I make a motion that we go with option 3.
I second that motion.
All right, there's a motion on option 3. Is there a second?
There was a second.
Rudy seconded.
Rudy
All right, any
seconded.
discussion on option 3? And explain to the council and to the public what this motion of direction is.
Essentially what this would do is to take, well, Councilmember Smith, why don't you explain it?
Okay.
Good one.
We have some balance right now in the fund. So this would kind of commit this spare balance out of type B for the next 2 years, plus what we have accumulated. And replace some in Prop A. We have $52 million worth of streets. We'd take $10.4 million worth of those streets in Prop A, and we can immediately start on that because it takes, we'll take the $10.4 million and pick those streets and spend that on that. That opens up $10.4 million to add to Prop A for residential streets, just like we did in the 2016 bond. We've got the language sitting out there. There's no change as far as total debt on there. There's no change as far as tax rates with it. The one thing it does is it takes Prop B money, spends it on arterials and collectors, and then opens up the Prop A bond for us. We've got these A's and B's, so we're in compliance with both the language and the spirit of Prop B because we're spending that money on arterials and collectors, and we're spending a small portion. We're only spending of that bond issue 20% of that bond issue of residential streets. But it does give us residential streets in there that we don't have. And one other thing to add to it is, as we're going ahead, and if we do the 2.222 on our property tax, that will give us $10 million a year in 3 years, that this is a start as we get to those levels. So we're doing a balancing act there, trying to get the consistent street program going, the long-term street program going. So that's a 5-minute explanation of a 30-second topic.
Okay, and does this still allow you to move that 1.6 or no?
No, it does not, because it's committing it.
Okay.
You could do it in 2021 or 2022.
Or if your
can't do it.
Tax base increases and your property values go up, you might have a chance to move some over.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the motion of direction. Now, this is limited to the street propositions.
What we would do is we would take Prop A.
Well, the reason I'm saying this, I want to make sure this isn't. This is just for Prop A. This doesn't have anything to do with the other propositions. We've still got to talk about Parks and Rec, and we've still got to talk about some other things.
Correct.
Can I just add, excuse me, that those three, if I understand correctly, the 300% design, they're underway is Slough Road, Everhart, and Holly. So those are the 3 streets that would be paid for by the Type B.
Okay. We would have to, as a staff, we'll figure out how it would work in, because I'm not quite sure how that would work in. But what I understand, as I understand it, let me paraphrase it. We pull out $10.4 million from Prop A.
Dollars, not projects.
Projects. No, projects. We pull out $10.4 million worth of projects to be paid for on a spend-as-you-go over the next 3 years with our Type B money. Then we put the $10.4 million in residential street in the bond.
Right. Okay. So you're not proposing to borrow money to do the 10 million. You pay them as you collect the money as you go. So
correct.
It doesn't increase the debt. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, we're done. Congratulations to everybody.
Okay, Mayor.
And it's not everything everybody wanted, but it's a whole lot more than we've had in the past. So
it was a very, very good discussion, and we will come forward next, and I want to jump straight to the topic while we're there, rather than coming back to it later in the meeting. Does the council want to, here's the option that would be on the table. Does the council want to have a special meeting in August, or we're thinking the first Tuesday of the month? Or would you rather have a special item calling the election on the 14th? It typically requires 2 readings.
For the bonds? For the bond proposal?
Correct, and it would have to be an emergency item on the 14th. We could do a presentation on the 31st, and because of the window that the secretary has relevant to, we've got a 12-day window, and so the 14th is our drop dead. There's two pieces of legislature are impacting it, and we've got a 12-day window, and we won't meet that 12-day window without a special meeting. If the second reading is the 14th, then we would need a special meeting some other time. I would think the week before, which would be the 7th. If we don't do that, then what we will have to have is an emergency item that would only be one reading.
Well,
That's not my preference.
I wouldn't recommend an emergency on a bond thing, but.
Well, initially, what we suggested was to have a presentation on the bond, presentation on the draft ordinance for the bond election. We were going to have a presentation made on July the 31st. So it'd almost be like a future reading, I guess, because what Mr. Selman was talking about, our bond counsel has advised that legally the window to call the election is August 8th to August 20th. And we don't have, it's the 8th. So even the 7th won't work. So,
the 8th would work.
Yeah, it'd be the 8th through the 20th. And so he didn't want any action. He recommended no action at all taken prior to that. So July 31st is our next regular meeting date. So that's why we said, well, maybe what we'll do then is to present it to council as the draft ordinance, and that way we can take any input that you may have at that time. And then we'll vote it on one reading, emergency reading, on the 14th. So it's not like you wouldn't see it prior to that, but we wouldn't have action. And that's just what our bond counsel recommended. So what Mr. Selman is saying, he's more comfortable with actually having action. So if we were to do that, we would have to have it during that, it would be August 8th, I guess, would be the week prior. So it's up to they're both valid options. It's just up to the council. When I was thinking through it, I thought the council would prefer not to have a special council meeting, but it is an option.
Well, I would prefer having a special council meeting than having an emergency meeting on a bond issue. I just don't, emergency doesn't, and bonds just don't go together unless you got a pipe break or something. That's my personal feeling. And if it was a special meeting, it wouldn't take long. It'd just simply be a formality. You had to go through procedure within the window that the calendar gives you.
And take the first action on the item.
I mean, by the time that gets here, the decision's pretty much been made. It's the formality, right? I mean, it'll be open for public comment if people have some comments to make or anything. Mr. Garza?
Mayor, if we have a special meeting, would we just have this particular item on the agenda, kind of like a workshop?
Correct.
We wouldn't go through all the formalities that we have in a regular meeting?
We would only be bringing the bond to the council.
Yeah, I'd be okay with a special meeting.
Just pick a date you can have a special meeting, give us a couple options so people can look at their calendars.
Okay, we'll do.
That will work for your scheduling, but emergency meeting on a bond issue, I think, would not be a good PR.
Well, many cities actually do it on emergency, but many cities actually do it on one reading. No, I'm just saying it's a valid option, but if the council prefers something different, of course we'll do it.
Yeah, I think that's what the council prefers. Yeah. Okay. All right. What else we got?
Mayor,
we voted, right? We voted on the motion to direction.
Yes,
that's complete.
All right. So now that's budget. Now we go. All right. You're on now, Mr. Selman.
Mayor, the next item is to talk about the park issues. You've raised this issue the last couple of meetings. What we wanted to do was put together a presentation, and that presentation then will lead us into the discussion on the bond proposition for the parks, which is Proposition C. So Jay, if you would take us through that.
Mayor and Council, Jay Ellington with Parks and Recreation. Good morning. I'll flip through these pretty quickly for you. Remember that one of our primary care functions for the community is mowing grass. We mow 5,100 acres of grass between 185 park sites and then the stormwater basins as well. We've got 5 different levels of how we mow in there, and I'll go back over that again for you in just a minute. As well as just recently, we've increased our overtime hours and are beginning to catch up in our system. So that's at least some good news as far as how the grass is growing right now. Just a little bit about what those services are in the park operations side. Where our facilities are located as well, and the number of sites and buildings that we have. Remember also that you've helped us work with the repurposed parks list that we asked the citizens to vote for us. And there's the recap at the bottom of that slide. I'll make sure you get this so you know to share that with your citizens as well. We've got still have a number of those to continue to work on, as well as we are working on a new list in our repurposed parks list also for as we work through our next master plan update. We have 57 active groups helping us with the Adopt a Park. So we've got lots of folks helping us in the community. And that may be everywhere from one person who's picking up trash from us to a group of 25 that's helping us build something. So we have lots of groups involved with us across the city. Here's that standard of care again. So that mowing piece that you see right up at the top there, 7-day, 14, 21, and then seasonally, is the primary cycle that we are in. We did with our grass mowing at a high clip for us. The 7 and 14 days got a little bit behind in our system as well because it took more time to get that grass knocked down and move on to the next list. Again, these are the type of schedule that we've put in. This has been affected over the last several years with reductions in our park maintenance number of employees as well. So this has slipped a little bit, but again, we stay as close as we can to this when we are able to, all our resources are there and we have normal rainfall, etc. We stay as close to this as we can. Now, this is the first time y'all have probably seen this council district list. So this actually lays out the parks for each of the 5 districts and shows you which ones are in that level A, level B, which are those 7 to 14 days, every 7 to 14 days, which ones are in level C, which are every 21 days or so, and then which ones are seasonal out in the far right side of those columns. So you see this for each of the 5 districts. And so this is the first time y'all have had a chance to look at this, review it. We would love to have your input into this process as well too. You may see one that needs to be moved in that process, and if it meets the criteria to move it up or move it back, we'll be glad to look at that and work with you in that process as well. So this has all 5 districts in there by the sites themselves. Of course, our challenges have really been funding challenges and resource challenges over the last few years where we've reduced our park system. So that's caused a number of things in our system. Again, currently I want to share with you too that I currently have 38 vacancies in park techs. These are the lowest laborers in my system, okay? Hard to find. We're in competition with every business there is in the community and every other private entity and public entity as well too. It's hard to keep them. We have a constant turnover there, so I'll probably sign 2 or 3 resignations or somebody moving somewhere else today, okay? And tomorrow I may hire 5, okay? But I'm constantly trying to manage this group of labor, which is difficult. We think we are doing a good job with the amount of resources we have. We still, even last year, maybe it was 2 years ago now, the last thing we took out was a crew that we called our hot shot crew, and this was a crew that went to the areas that we needed to go to when our cycle going around those park areas didn't get to it in time, okay? So we used to have a hot shot crew. We don't even have that anymore. So we've limited ourselves in our ability to take care of the system at the highest level. So that's what I share with you about that. Some of that's employee pay related in those lower positions. Some of it's just the market itself and how those folks are taken up in the marketplace as far as labor goes. And then, of course, we do have those community expectations. So it is about what does that park in my neighborhood look like? And so we're able to at least share that we're in a rotating cycle. and it's a 7-day, a 14-day, or a 21-day cycle. If you'll bear with us, we're going to get there as quickly as we can, and we're not skipping around in the system. We're going from Park A to Park B to Park C, right on around until we get back around to that, and then we start all over again. So those are some of the challenges we've been facing, and we are I mentioned increasing overtime to help us deal with that as well, and we are slowly catching up in the system. And the last piece I'll mention for you is just to remind you that the PRAC board adopted a resolution that they sent forward to you concerning some increases in bond projects that they would like to see as well. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Mayor, now we come to the next slide for the remaining portion of the propositions. Jay, if you'd advance that to the next slide. Jay. Okay, never mind. No, go ahead. Thanks. Coming to this, Mayor, the City Council did at the last meeting remove the 1.2, almost 1.3 million in Proposition E, in keeping with the 1 cent, 1 cent wave methodologies. We kind of have this put together. Of course, each one might impact tax differently, but assuming all were approved, that 1.2 has not been targeted for anything other than it's just removed at this point.
Okay, well, Mr. Molina.
Thank you, sir. In consideration of that, I know that we did remove the 1.2, close to 1.3 from public facilities, including City Hall and fleet operations. In light of that, I would like to consider taking that money, and that was deleted from Proposition E, and adding that accordingly to Proposition C in consideration of the park improvements as recommended by the PRAC board, including the shade and splash areas. I would like to make that a motion.
Well, there's a motion to move the The 1.2 from Proposition E to Proposition C, is that correct?
That is correct.
So,
in consideration of the recommendations of the PRAC board, and I know that the PRAC board, their recommendations included a substantial amount, and I'm only talking about taking this 1.2 that we deleted and adding it to the Proposition C.
well, then that's fine, or maybe we need to have a second if we're going to have some discussion, but.
Hold on a second.
Did you second that?
I seconded it, but with.
All right. Okay, Ms. Wartho.
Well, go ahead.
Well, if we're going to be doing anything with Parks and Recreation, I think we need to have a discussion if we're going to, about the whole Parks and Recreation. I've got a problem with Parks and Recreation. We can't maintain and keep up with what we have. And I don't see any justification for adding any more load on their wagon. We can't maintain and keep what we have. And if we just keep loading it down, it's just going to explode. And it's just going to be an absolute collapse of the department. We would be, in my opinion, putting the death knell in their coffin, because all you're going to do is subject them to more work, more criticism, and they do not have the ability, and that I'm not saying, and it may be a funding issue. You got 38 vacancies over there. I just think philosophically, if we can't maintain what we have, I don't get around to all the parts. I got an email or a text just this morning. Notice several parks around the neighborhoods being neglected. Coopier Park is 4 to 5 feet tall, very unacceptable. What's the point? Previously selling some parks to maintain others, and it doesn't happen. I mean, that just came today out of the clear blue. We can't maintain what we have. We got 38 vacancies. How much money in the budget? Those are funded but vacant positions. How much money does that amount to? $1 million?
We'd have to look
$2
at the
million?
positions, Mayor.
Well, the reason I'm saying is if you can't find those people, there are people, they have got lawn trailers hooked up to cars all over this town going around doing people's yards. You contract it out. And I don't know how many 38 people, but I would think probably 38 people is probably $1 million a year or more. How much? Nobody can give me that answer, what that is in the budget? You got 38 people in your budget and you don't know how much it is? Huh?
Probably lower level positions, around $1 million. 38.
Around $1 million?
Yes, sir.
Well, I believe you could find a lot of people with lawnmowers and riding tractors out there for $1 million could mow parks pretty quickly. And if you look at the requirements, you don't have to overload them like they're building a $50 million wastewater plant. They're just mowing grass. I mean, these are some of the things you need to look at. Our objective is to have nice, clean, neat parks, if that's what we want. And we're not doing it. I mean, I don't know how many of them have the orange fences around half the equipment in the parks now that you can't use. St. Andrews got one. I don't know how long it takes to find a new 4x4 to replace or whatever happens to be the problem. But the priority and the urgency just doesn't seem to be there. And that's my frustration. I mean, I got a daughter-in-law that goes out and takes, she's a photographer and takes people to parks and stuff. She went out to the Oso Park the other day, she said, people were there. I said, don't go back over there. She said, we just saw a coral snake, so they don't go back over there. And yeah, we're gonna have snakes in parks if they're up next to lakes and things, but that doesn't mean your whole park needs to be a snake bed. If you're getting close to the water, you can understand not mowing it, but not the whole park. You know, and so I think we really need to have a philosophical discussion on what we want to do with our parks. I want us to have first-class parks. I don't want us to have a whole bunch of parks that are not worth a dime.
Mayor, I think you make a very good point. One of the things that the previous council has done, as you were to go through Jay's presentation, we sent this to you last week, is the level of maintenance. When they looked at a level A, B, C, D, and the natural areas, when they were looking at that, it was a function of budgetary constraints. What can we maintain and at what level can we maintain it? And then they went through a process, they established this maintenance criteria and level of maintenance, and then they looked at all the parks in their systems and they assigned a certain level of maintenance to each park. And again, that was an action to address budgetary issues in terms of maintenance and how well can every park be manicured. And the decisions have been that no, every park cannot be manicured, and that goes right back to your point. And I think your disposition is that if it can't be manicured, then we really need to be thinking whether we should have it on our system at all. The other thing that Jay presented was that the Adopt a Park program, the attempts to sell parks, all of that is part of that initiative and that thought process of reducing the number of park spaces and at total acreage. So what staff can do is to revive that as part of the discussion. On this particular bond specifically, though, the projects identified in the bond package for parks are senior centers, rec centers, participation projects where someone comes in. Jay could describe that a little bit, but it's in your book. Park system playgrounds, the very thing that you've mentioned. We've got playgrounds in disrepair, and we need to replace playgrounds. Pools aquatics, and then the Greenwood Sports Complex. Those are, none of that is talking about mowing. It's talking about the facilities at hand.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're wanting to add more stuff here, you know, another $4 million that's going to take their time. And I mean, this whole pool system in the city may need to be looked at. I mean, how long has it been since, well, we don't get into the pools.
What we might find is that as splash pads come on, the pools.
All right, just getting back to the basics, dirt, parks. We've got an agenda item tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow, accepting $800 and something thousand worth of parkland because we're requiring developers to donate this land. We've reached the point it's ridiculous. I think it's an agenda item tomorrow.
It's committing
So we're still requiring
the resources
developers
from those funds
to provide us $800 and something thousand, almost $1 million worth of land that's going to be off the tax roll to grow weeds. We have no capacity to develop that park.
I think, is
What?
that the money in lieu of the land? Yeah, that's actually money going back to,
What it appeared to me was they were donating the land. If they're donating the money, well, then that's good.
Yeah, the money came in lieu of dedication.
Well, if it's money, that's a whole lot better. But at least that, maybe you can hire some guys to mow and get the parks we got up to date. But the way I read it was that they were taking more land, and that was not a good idea, in my opinion. All right, Ms. Guajardo.
Thank you. Well, I agree. And this is why I said with discussion, I am seconding, because I do believe, I agree with what you're saying 100%. But I also believe that this is a balancing. This is an issue. These are two different issues we're talking about. Mr. Molina, I believe you're talking about the projects. You're talking about, let's put this money towards these projects here under parks. Mayor, your concern, as is the rest of ours, I believe, is the maintenance and operations of this department. And I don't think that we can sit up here and complain about this isn't getting done, this isn't getting done, and we get these complaints and those complaints, and it's all back to my point from day one of being on this council. The communication is lacking there, all the way down to our constituents, because I would like to know, I would love to sit down and say, okay, Mr. Ellington, you hear the complaints, you see those emails come through, what do you need, in your professional opinion as a director, to make this department more whole? Kind of like the streets. We're at 53% green. What is the goal? I don't know what we are in Parks and Rec, but we're not. I don't know what the goal. Well, the goal is always 100%. Do we have budget for 100%? Maybe not. But we can't scream and yell at you if you don't have the funds. But you can't defend your position if you don't say to us, whether we like it or not, or approve it or not, or throw it out the door, what is it you need to function this the way we are sitting here asking you to do it? So you have 38, that's what I want to know. Because right now we're not talking about maintenance and operations. That can happen at the next budget meeting. You got a 700 plus surplus in property tax valuations. Well, let's put that here and let's make a difference and bring this up to par where we want to see it and where our constituents want to see it. There's your money there. I'm just throwing that out there. My point is, if we don't know, because we don't know. I know I've gone to your department before and I see this huge board or something on the wall, and there are more missing pieces in that than ever. I don't know if everybody up here has seen that. So as a business owner, you have to know, what is it you need? Doesn't mean I'm going to give it to you, but what do you need? Because then I need to be able to tell all the moms that come up here and those emails, ma'am, here's the deal. We don't have the money for that, but here's what we're going to try and do, because from my understanding, our director says we need to fill at least 40 of those positions. Those 40 equal out to be X amount of money, and then we work from there. We don't even know what that is. So that is that's my 2 cents on the maintenance and operations of this, which is the greatest concerns of everyone who, we get complaints from. This here is about projects. So the discussion that I was suggesting to have here is the 1.2? Yes, 1.2. So that would go towards, Mr. Molina, your intent was to add or enhance these, or towards the splash pads themselves and
Splash pads and shade.
Right, that's right.
Lord knows we need shade. I'm sorry. I'll wait till I'm...
No, go ahead. I'm good.
I've got 2 little ones at home, and we visit our parks at least once a week. I've got a park down the street from my house. We'll get up and drive to neighborhood parks. And I can say that in my experience, and of course, for the most part, these are parks in District 2. For the most part, the parks are well maintained. The grass gets high, but of course, we've had a lot of rain here recently. And I know I've had to increase the mowing on my yard because of that. But even so, you rarely see the grass extremely high where the park is not usable. And what I'm asking is to increase the bond by 1.2 because with the climate that we have here, we have a lot of sun, we have a lot of heat. I'm asking for shade in some of these parks. There is an appetite out there for splash pads. It may not be a priority, but it would be something that I think a lot of people would appreciate here in town. I know I would. And so that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm considering here. And I hope that you guys would. Actually, I'm going to challenge you all. I'm going to throw this challenge out there. I'm going to challenge you all to spend an hour at your local park for leisure. Go take a walk around the park. Go have fun. Take family out there, and just enjoy your park for about an hour. And I think in doing so, you would hopefully appreciate the need for shade, at least.
Okay, there's Ms. Opal.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of thoughts about that. If there's $700,000 that's out there, I think we need to kind of set a priority as the whole council as to how we want to use that. The second thing I want to bring out is that Mr. Ellington referenced adopt-a-parks. And as you talk about splash pads and as you talk about opportunities for use, all of those, they come at a cost. And I'm going to make this statement, and I just have to say, if the proposal I had put forward on streets had passed, it would have reduced the tax rate, the rate that we would be bonding. Would that have freed up money that we could have put into operations for the city? If we reduced our debt, could we have freed up money for operations in the city?
Only if you moved money from the INS to the M&O.
Which we could have done and made that a joint proposal. So my point being, it's about $1 million.
But the amount would have been not even a half cent, about a
well, half cent would get you about
a fifth of a penny.
650, yeah. So the point being, we have to leverage our resources in the best way that we can. If we're not willing to go into debt here, we're going to have to go into debt there. And so basically, Mr. Molina, what you're suggesting is that we go into additional debt at about $1.2 million to be able to fund these parks. That's certainly one approach, and it's valued and it's valuable. The second thing I'm going to challenge, if we're going to put challenges out there, is to Mr. Ellington. When I worked for a major retailer, we were not funding here in this market, but we were funding splash pads in other markets as a donation, as a contribution to the city. So I think we have to look at how we can beef up the way that people can help us do some of the things that we're being asked to do. I'm not sure where you are in that process. I know that's a very detailed kind of thing, but I think that's an opportunity to do that. I think the other thing that we have to look at long term is, do we still have too many parks? And I think there's another list that's being developed that we go back and then sell those parks back in the community, put them back on the tax rolls because we don't need them not being funded. So I think we have to look at this in total. I would also suggest maybe Billish Park we take off because right now it's not looking like it's getting mowed at all. So there are just some things that we need to begin to look at, that if we have to go into debt for one thing or the other, what's the smartest way to go and do that? And we have to solve this problem. We have to reach out to the community. We have to go to philanthropy. My last question is, what is the life cycle cost of a splash pad? Because our bonding does not pay for ongoing maintenance of these infrastructure items that we put in. And I think that's what the mayor is alluding to. The more that we add, the more that we're going to be challenging you and the staff to continue to fix and repair and all of, and we live in this salty environment that things just flat don't hold up. And so if we don't have something that's going to help us from a life cycle standpoint, it may work for the first 6 months or the first season, but then the next season rolls around and what do you have? And then it's very uncomfortable, much the same it is with the North End Park and with the Water Garden, that people look at us and go, why don't you keep up with your stuff? Well, the answer is it costs an awful lot of money to do that. So if we can't have that partnership between how we're going to fund the ongoing maintenance, it's not, it may feel good up front, but if we can't sustain it, we're going to end up like, I went by St. Andrews Park, Mayor, and there's like orange stuff around 2 swings, and there's grass that's gone back to nature, and that's right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And I think those are the things that start generating the concerns by our citizens. And we don't have, you know, philanthropy where someone drives by and sees kids playing out in the sun like they did back in the mid-'80s and 90s when we had, you know, we had headquarters companies here. We had people who had a lot of money, and they would see a problem, and they would go, and a week later there would be trucks and folks showing up so that those kids didn't have to play in the sun. We're going to have to challenge those folks in our community who have resources to do that to help us with this problem, because it is huge, and we need some philanthropy on the behalf of our citizens in our parks. So I agree with you.
All right, Mr. Tillman, you were trying to...
Yeah, Mayor, a lot of this is budget discussion, and I really think that I'm hearing the council loud and clear. I think what you would like to do in this budget process, post the draft coming to you, is to focus in on departments like this and zero in on certain activities and things going on, rather than having the presentations the way we got them at the last year. And we'll look to do something like that. And we also want to talk about when we want to start having the post-draft workshops. Right. And I think Jay can prepare, and we as a staff will prepare for that discussion on park maintenance. But we don't have that in front of us right now.
Okay. All right, we got a motion before us, and you want to speak to the motion?
I'm going to make one last comment. It's my understanding we do we not try or reach out to corporations and such as the MCI Senior Center? I just think that's very important. Please, you guys let us know everything you're doing, because some may know and some may not. And I happen to know that because I've been in y'all's office and sat. But that's so important. I didn't know until I was there. And I think we all need to know, so that we do know that you are reaching out. You are trying to make these partnerships, such as the Senior Center, MCI, I think it's called. So anyway, please include that. Everything you guys do, which you are doing, I just think we don't necessarily always know, is so important for us to be made aware of. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Molina's motion is that we move the $1.2 million for Proposition E into Proposition C for splash pads or et cetera. Just move the number in there, and all right. Bottom line is the bond proposal is still at $92 million.
96.
96. And if we would pull this out, that'd get it down to 94 or something. So the original bond proposal number doesn't change, just where you're going to spend the money. All right, so that's the motion on this one right here. Any more discussion on this? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, we'll move that 1.2 up to the parks for splash pads. You might be interested to know that the neighborhood group at TCR has wanted splash parks, but yet TxDOT wanted us to fix the park over there for $800,000. So the state wanted us to spend $800,000 to fix up the park, but anyway.
Mayor, very
splash
quick.
pads are exciting. Yes, sir.
Are there any issues in C, D, F, and G? If not, we'll be bringing those forward to you.
I guess at this point, anybody got any? Yeah, he is gone.
He is gone.
And that's going to be under maintenance and operation.
So D, F, and G.
Right? And those kind of things can be either operation and maintenance or COs if you have to make repairs rather quickly or something. All right. Anything else on that? All right, Mr. Molina.
Thank you, sir. On Proposition D, you have an item here for Heritage Park. D, Heritage Park, historical houses improvements. Are those improvements to structures that are not rented out by third-party organizations?
Well, it certainly isn't the ones that are rented to CVB, because they covered theirs. And, okay.
Those would be the additional properties there that we do own. So if you'll remember, we're in 2 or 3 of those houses with our own staff as well. So we've had some issues that have been reoccurring there for a number of years that we need to take care of. So that's what those are for.
Okay, any other things? Do you need a motion of direction that you think we're done on the bond proposal?
If I don't hear anything else, that'll be what's coming to you for action.
Anybody have any comments? Are good with what we got at this point? Everybody's good to go?
Okay, a couple of slides over.
So
we've got the schedule. We just worked that out because we had to work out whether or not to have a special meeting or whether or not to have an emergency item. And then the next item, the final item, we are anticipating $700,000 in additional revenues on the ad valorem side for the M&O side. And two options are on the table for you. One is to reduce the utility transfer to the general fund that's currently set at $4.4 million, and the other one is to offset the reductions in the Parks and Recreation, which is at $621. We could shake the box really up, but I felt that these were two items that are very pointed and direct relevant to going into the final draft of the budget.
Well, I mean, if you were, I mean, I don't see any lights. I would originally, I mean, initially, I would just say reduce your transfers and put that back in the fund. If you need some money later on, you can transfer it back, but that's what I would do with it initially. That'd be my recommendation. Mr. Smith?
Well, I guess, Mr. Mayor, we were talking earlier about the utility cost, and we're trying to transfer some to that cost to the bond. So this helps accomplish that too, would it?
If you put it back in the utility?
Well, yeah, if we put it back, that's $700,000, and we don't have to increase utilities in the future, right?
Mark Van Vleck, Assistant City Manager. This was actually cuts to come up with the 4.4, so it would reduce the cuts that we're having to make within utilities.
Yeah, but that all figures into your rate model, right? So
yes,
when you're doing the next rate model, you have $700,000 less that you'll have to increase.
Yes, sir.
Utilities. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Van Vleck.
Ms. Opal?
You know, it seems a little bit disingenuous to, on the one hand, talk about high weeds and grass and maintenance and those kinds of things, and not look at an opportunity to take advantage of some unanticipated revenue. I do hear what you're saying, that perhaps we could use that little handy piece of punctuation called an ampersand, and maybe we add some revenue back to Park and Recreation, and we return some back to the utility fund. We cannot continue to expect a general fund department like Park and Recreation to do more. We just suggested that if the voters approve this, we're going to create some significant maintenance. I don't know if anyone's actually called another city that operates splash pads and finds out what the ongoing maintenance costs are. We have a very large park at Water's Edge that has no dedicated staff to maintain it like we do out at the Oso Preserve. So we are going to continue to see challenges and stress put on this function, and if we don't step up and say we're going to have to help fund it at some level, we're just going to continue to see a decline. So, you know, I would split it. I would do 60-40, pick some, I mean, I would suggest flat splitting it, and half of it would be dedicated back to the general fund in support of Park and Recreation to address some of the problems the mayor's identified. The other half would go back to the utilities to relieve some of the cuts that utilities made. That would be my motion.
Mr. Roy?
I'm trying to understand as far as what the mayor was saying, and I think what I'm hearing is that part of the problem that we're having with our parks is we don't have the personnel to take care of it. There's, what, 38 positions out there in terms of that we can't get the grass cut, and it was suggested that maybe we go out and hire independent contractors. So I think maybe we ought to table that. And first, let's see if we can't get, or how hard that suggestion is to maybe get out there and get some independent contractors and get the grass cut. Because one part's maintenance, but the other part is just not having the manpower to get the job done.
Well, I mean, you're sitting here with $1 million worth of allocation in the department right now. It's just sitting there. And if you can't hire the people, then hire a contractor. And I just think there needs to be an urgency and a new way to try to solve a problem. And this one-time thing, they've got $1 million, and I think you can get a lot of grass mowed for $1 million. And it's a one-time thing, and if you, I'm not sure that, I understand that, but I would rather reduce the utility need because we get lots of people hitting us on utility costs, and those are going to continue to be a problem for us. So, I don't know. Ms. Opal?
Oh, sorry. I didn't get a second. I didn't get a second on that motion, so if there's no second on the motion, then it's going to die. So there you go.
So, I mean, here's two potential uses. Put it back in the utility fund, which would have a positive impact on potential rate considerations. Is that correct, Mr. Van Vleck? You said? Or we could offset the part.
Tell us a little more about that.
But the rates won't be set again until this time next year, right? So you wouldn't see any immediate reductions necessarily. You'd put something back that you took out.
Yeah, in other words, it's positive in terms of when rates consideration when it comes up.
Yes, sir. And the other part is what this is reducing is the pay-as-you-go improvements. That is what the cuts were going to be. So what we're going to be doing is reducing the amount of like wastewater lines that we repair and water lines is how this 4.4 is coming up.
Will help.
If this goes back in, it will help. Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Smith, Mr. Garza, excuse me.
Well, the reason you'd have a second, that because I thought that was a reasonable suggestion, but the actual dollars, I mean, the roads don't get certified till the 31st, right? That's what I understand.
The 25th. So this hadn't occurred yet. It's just we're just anticipating we may get a little more, but we don't know. We won't know until Wednesday.
Yeah, I'd rather table the discussion
how much value
until we actually know. And then secondly, I thought that we were going to have a utility rate discussion sometime in August, and if I know that we suggested that the last time we took action on utility rates, and we made a decision last summer that we weren't going to revisit rates for 2 years, but because of the issues that we've had here recently with the UBO and the rates, I thought we were going to have another discussion, and we can decide what to do about rates in August. So I just think it's premature to make a decision this
Whoever made the motion to table, I'll second that.
Okay,
Well, Mayor,
that's the way I feel right now.
Hold on.
Please don't make that motion just yet, because then there's no discussion on a motion to table. Your budget's going to be delivered to you on the 31st. Okay, this is some anticipated revenue. If you don't allocate it, I will. I'll decide, and then we'll come into the budget workshops and talk about moving it around or not at that point. But I'm going to allocate it. If you don't. That's right. I'm fine with that.
Well,
I'm fine with that. You'll have a balanced budget. You're not going to have a budget that's going to be 700,000 in the black for you to decide what to do with it.
Well, that's what the manager's job is for.
Yes, sir.
So do your thing and bring it back to us.
It'll be in the draft budget.
All right.
There you go.
Okay, what else you need? That's it?
That's it. We did a lot of fishing today.
You know, I want to thank the staff, and I think what this says to us, there's no, is there anybody here in the media? Oh, there's Channel 3 back there. Don't be leaving yet. As they say, we've come a long way, baby. What I'm hearing you saying is that this 700 plus or minus surplus, based on the revenues generated and all the decisions and the management and everything that's done, we have gone from a potential $20 million shortfall to a $700,000 positive.
By cutting and moving a lot of money.
Well,
it's not the cuts in parks alone is that amount.
Well, I mean, for the overall budget.
Right.
And to my knowledge, there was no job elimination other than just attrition. Nobody's going to lay anybody off that I'm aware of.
Correct. We were not looking at that.
And so my hat's off to the staff for the work you've done and the willingness to make the cuts where we're needed in order to get us in there. The good fortune is that it appears that the assessments coming back on the property values were not as negative as we thought they were going to be based on the hurricane. I've not heard the numbers on Port Aransas and some of those, but I think they're going to be substantial over there. But no, Corpus Christi, we came out all right, property value-wise, assessment-wise. So I want to thank the staff for their work, for making this happen. Thank the council for, in some cases, taking a pretty tough stance, but I think that's what we were elected for, is to make some tough decisions. But Mr. Selman stepping in here at the rounding third and coming home, that got us there, for doing that. And I just think that everybody ought to be proud of the work that we put together. And the bond package, I think, is going to be a good one when we get all the numbers finally in. And things are looking good. And I'm proud of the council, I'm proud of the staff, and we look forward to the final product, and then we'll
thank you, Mayor.
See where we go from there. Any other comments? If not, we will.
Just want to clarify, no one's being cut, but there are positions that are being cut.
That's all right, but no bodies are being laid on the street. These are just positions. So, you're adjourned.